So, meet Neville Roy Singham. He's an American tech billionaire. And according to one pretty explosive investigation, he's at the very center of a plan to use his massive fortune to fund what's being called a color revolution. Not somewhere far away, but right here in the United States. Okay, to really get our heads around this incredible claim, we're going to break it down. First, what in the world is a color revolution when you're talking about America? Then, how did this guy go from being a radical activist to a tech mogul? Where's all these money going? What's this alleged connection to China all about? And finally, what is Washington, D.C. doing about any of this?
All right, let's start with that central accusation, because it's a big one. You hear this term, color revolution, being thrown around. But what does it actually mean when it's pointed at things happening right here at home?
Well, this is where it gets interesting, because the term itself is basically being flipped on its head. Usually, a color revolution means some foreign power is trying to destabilize a country from the outside. But the charge here is totally different. It's that Singham is funding a similar kind of chaos and division, but he's doing it from inside the US, using his own massive fortune. But to even begin to understand the why behind all these accusations, you really have to look at the man himself. I mean, how do you end up with this unique mix of radical ideology and just immense wealth? That's the story of Neville Roy Singham. Singham's story really starts with radical politics being a part of his life from birth. His father was a well-known academic, very focused on anti-colonialism. By the 1970s, Singham himself was involved with groups that were influenced by Maoist ideology, so much so that he even got flagged by the FBI. But then his life takes this wild turn. He goes and founds a super successful IT company called ThoughtWorks. And then in 2017, he marries Jodie Evans, who was a really prominent activist herself. And then we get to the number that changes the entire game, nearly $800 million. That's about how much he walked away with when he sold his company back in 2017. According to this investigation, that fortune is the rocket fuel for this entire activist network we're talking about. Now, from Singham's perspective, this isn't about creating chaos. The source material reports that he sees it as a socialist act, using the fortune he made in a capitalist system to challenge that very system. He's framing it as ideological philanthropy. So with that giant fortune, he's alleged to have built this really complex web of nonprofits. The big question is, where exactly is all that cash going and what is it being used for? The investigation points to a core group of organizations getting the money. And we're not talking about small activist circles here. These are prominent groups, like the anti-war organization Code Pink, a political party called the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and a big event space in New York called the People's Forum. And the sheer scale of the funding is just staggering. The People's Forum got over $20 million in just 5 years. That's basically all of its income. Code Pink apparently relies on him for about a quarter of its entire budget, and the PSL reportedly considers him its main financial backer. So this isn't just a donation. For these groups, it's their lifeblood. And the investigation tries to connect this money directly to action on the ground. It alleges that funding for the PSL was linked to riots in Los Angeles and that the People's Forum was behind disruptive shutdowns in Minnesota. The larger network is also accused of amplifying major protest movements, everything from university campus protests to the Shut Down for Palestine initiative. Okay, so this brings us to what is arguably the most serious part of this whole investigation, the allegation that this network isn't just about Singham's personal beliefs, but that it's also tied to the strategic goals of the Chinese Communist Party. Remember that year, 2017? It just keeps popping up. After he sells his company, Singham packs up and moves to Shanghai. The investigation claims this is the exact moment his alignment with the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, goes from just ideological to something much more direct. The report then lays out this whole web of alleged entanglements, partnerships with Chinese state media, business deals with CCP-affiliated groups, and funding for media outlets that seem to just echo China's official party line on really controversial issues. It even goes back in time, pointing to his role as an advisor to the tech giant Huawei. This quote from the source really puts a fine point on how his critics in Washington see him. They don't see some random activist. They see a central figure in what they're calling China's strategy of sowing discord, a deliberate campaign to pour gasoline on the political and social fires already burning in the United States. Now, with accusations this serious flying around, you had to know the U.S. government would start paying attention. So let's take a look at the official response and the investigations that are now actually happening. It looks like Washington is coming at this from multiple angles. The FBI is reportedly trying to follow the money. The Department of Justice is being pressured to investigate him as a possible unregistered foreign agent. A House committee has hit him with a subpoena, and another is digging into the tax-exempt status of his nonprofits, basically asking if they're acting as propaganda arms for China without telling anyone. So, at the end of the day, it all boils down to two completely different ways of looking at the same set of facts. Is he a committed socialist who's just putting his money where his mouth is, supporting causes he truly believes in? Or is he what his critics claim, a tool for a foreign power, using his wealth and his network to deliberately weaken America from the inside? And it's really important to remember this entire breakdown is based on the deep dive investigation done by the shadowy. If you want to go deeper, you can check out all their reporting on their website. And all of this leaves us with the massive question at the heart of this whole thing. Where do you draw the line between ideological philanthropy and foreign meddling? As all these federal probes move forward, the answer to that question could have some pretty profound consequences for activism, for free speech, and for national security.